Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great day. We're here for the next episode of Bringing Life to Characters, where we ask that magical question of all of our guests as we get towards the end. And my guest tonight, we met in kind of an unusual way. So I'm going to share a little quick picture here. This is the first time I ever saw our guest. He was lying on the floor and playing a victim in an event we were doing in Branson, Missouri, and did not know who he is. And we got to chat a little bit. And he was also at a table there at Branson as well. And he was actually across from me, and we got to talk a little bit. So we're going to bring him up now, but hopefully we still have him here and he hasn't run away. Gregory N. Whitis, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Randy. Appreciate you having me tonight. It's an honor being interviewed by you because I read about your Silver Fanchon Awards and your Reader Award, and I appreciate you having me. It's great.
No, I enjoy talking to a lot of authors. This is I think show 47, so I've had a lot of interviews, and it's always great to hear everybody's journey and how they got there. So we met back earlier this year in Branson, Missouri, for the big event, and you got to play a dead guy. So how was that for you? Did you enjoy that?
Well, it takes an amazing amount of concentration to lay on the floor and not move when you got about 100 people looking at you. I was just praying that a flea wasn't going to come up and bite me on the nose and have to go into a rigor mortis. But yeah, it was interesting. I've never played a dead guy before. I hope I don't have to do it again.
Well, you did a good job, I know, and I interviewed T. O'Fallon, who ran and she told me, she said that was the best one she's ever done. She said it was so good. They had such a great reaction. The crowd was wonderful. It was a fun time. Everyone thought I was the killer, so everyone was telling me
Yeah,
afterwards. They were all like
right.
going, "I feel so bad. I had you convicted and hung and everything." So
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yep, that was a good time. And I hope to get back to some more Tropicons. Lanessa Lane does a fantastic job running those things, and I'll be doing some more of them. Yep.
Yeah, she's got what, one or two in Florida coming up, and I think she was going to do another one in Branson.
Yep.
I don't know. They're always fun. I mean, I wish I could afford to do every author event that's out there just to get around, but it
Hmm.
gets to be a little steep after a while. That it's fun to read readers and other authors and make
Right.
connections.
Right. Right. Mhm.
So tell us a little about yourself. Tell us a little important stuff. All the things
Okay.
that people need to know about you.
Well, my basic academic stuff, I went to school at Iowa State University, got a bachelor's degree there. Um, Spent about a year working at a Radio Shack, and then I decided I wanted to go to Auburn University and study fisheries. So I got my master's in fisheries, and then from there I got a job on Alabama's largest catfish farm. At that time, it was about 500 acres of water, and I managed to sink a pickup truck while working one night, and I'll tell that story tonight. And then Auburn, I applied for Auburn University to be an extension agent, and they said, "Yeah, I think you'd be a good man to tell other farmers how to sink a pickup truck." So I spent 33 years with Auburn as an extension specialist for the catfish industry in West Alabama, and I believe you've got some pictures of the catfish farms. Um, so I retired about.
That
There
was
you go.
one of them.
Yeah. What you've got there is you've got a pond being harvested, and there's probably about 10,000, 15,000 pounds of fish in that net, and then we lift them out of the water with that crane net, and they get loaded in a live haul truck. And I've got a funny story later on about live haul I'll share. There
That's
you go.
cool. Yeah.
And the live haul trucks, they can haul about 15,000, 20,000 pounds of fish at a time to the processing plant. And so I spent like I said, 33 years of that industry, and I'm kind of proud of my work there. I helped a lot of farmers become a lot more efficient and introduce some new technology to them. Most of my biggest, I guess, lasting legacy with the catfish industry is I introduced remote monitoring, so the farmers could stay in bed at night and look at their phone or their laptop next to their bedstand and see how their ponds are doing, and then go back to sleep and get a couple more hours of sleep. So, and then the monitors would turn the aerators on and off. So, I kind of introduced the industry to that technology way back in the mid '80s. Yeah.
Did you trademark that? Did you make money off of that?
No. I basically the industry that moved in on that was a wastewater industry. The sewage lagoon ponds and all that, and somebody thought, well, maybe this would work in the catfish industry, and they contacted me, and we set up an experimental system, and this farmer was sitting in church, and his pager went off, and he took off and went to the farm, and sure enough, his fish were all up, gasping for air, and he had some kind of mid-morning oxygen crash, and because he got notified, he was able to get the aerators going and saved a pond of fish. And from that story forward, the automation technology just took off because it proved itself. Yeah. And then I retired from Auburn about 4 years ago. And somewhere during my tenure with Auburn, I became a part-time deputy sheriff. I went through the police academy at the age of 44. I was like the third or fourth oldest. No, I was actually the second oldest cadet in the academy, and I graduated fourth in my class at the age of 44. And then I served as a deputy sheriff for 10 years here in Hale County. And I've got all kinds of stories to tell about that. And I know you write crime drama. If you ever need some material, man, I'm here for you. And during all this time, I started working for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources as a nuisance alligator hunter. I had some experience in my aquaculture training working with large alligators, and Alabama started having a problem with nuisance alligators, and so I threw my name in the hat, and I was one of the first nuisance alligator hunters in the state. And my wife finally convinced me that as long as I still had all my arms and legs and fingers and toes, that maybe I should hang it up in January because my reflexes were getting a little bit slower. And you don't want to have slow reflexes when you're dealing with 11-foot alligators. So, I did most of this stuff concurrently. So that's why I'm not 120 years old. You know, so
A
I'm having,
nuisance alligator hunter.
yeah.
That's an interesting thing. I would never think of that being on somebody's resume. Seems very
It
odd.
was fun. I've
Yeah.
got a lot of funny stories about that too. And then I want to put a plug in for my wife. I'm married to my loving and enduringly patient wife, Karen. We've been married for about 43 years. And so
And
it's
what's the secret to that? 43 years.
all right. Well, for all you new writers out there, when she married me, she didn't know she was marrying a writer. She was marrying a fisheries guy.
Mhm.
And I took up writing maybe 10, 15 years later. And the secret to this marriage is she's got to be supportive, and you got to be supportive. So, when she's got hobbies, and her main hobby is daylilies. So, I'm a list. I listen to her daylily experiences, and you just got to be supportive of each other, and be a good listener. Always be a good listener. And a good spouse is your sounding board for your writing. So that's my secret.
Does she read all your stuff?
Yeah, yeah, she does. And of course, I bounce everything off of her, and that leads to a funny little side about us. We'll go out on the back deck, and she'll have her Long Island iced tea, and I'll have my Evan Williams neat, and she'll read my drafts, and she'll go, Greg, I wish you wouldn't use these bad words in your writing. And I said, Karen, I'm not using these bad words, and my characters are. And she just gives me the hump. And this. But anyway, we have a really good dialogue about my writing. She's my sounding board.
That's good. I like that. Yes. So blame the characters. Yes, the characters have got the potty mouth, right? So
Yeah, yeah. So now I'm going to give you the real world bio. This will explain my persona and my unique sense of humor. My readers often comment about my witty sense of humor, and then there's a reason for it. I am the product of a social experiment gone totally foobar. And for those of you who don't know what foobar means, I'll just clean it up a little bit. Screwed up beyond all recognition.
yes.
And this social experiment started back when I was 1968, when I was about 10, 11 years old. My dad and mom found a really neat summer camp up in northern Wisconsin near Lac du Flambeau. And this camp, it's kind of neat because I'm a Boy Scout volunteer. This camp was run by an officer that knew Baden Powell. Baden Powell was the founder of the Boy Scouts in England, and this guy came to the States and started a camp. And I went to this camp for 2 summers, and you couldn't get away with this stuff now, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, these boys from 6 to 12 years old would get out of bed, strip butt naked, run out of the cabin, run down to the lake shore, go down the steps, and jump in the lake. And that was our daily bath. All right, butt naked. And if you're from northern Iowa, you know that the lakes in northern Iowa and northern Wisconsin never really warm up in the summertime. And
Yeah.
if there's anybody in the audience with an 11-year-old girl, you might want to send them out for your beer or something. But I'm going to talk about Whitis here. So when you're like 13 years old, and you jump out of bed and you go down the lake, you might be carrying another appendage. And the thing I remember about this camp was the kitchen staff was on a railing sipping their coffee, watching all these boys butt naked jump in the lake, and they were just having a good old time with it. So I did that for 2 years, and that had a bearing on my persona. And then the third summer, somebody got the bright idea that if you took 5 well-rounded, good boys and you mixed them with 25 juvenile delinquents from South Chicago and put them on a remote island in Canada for 2 weeks, all the juvenile delinquents would turn into well-rounded boys. All right. Well, it didn't work out that way. My dad is a psychiatrist, and when I got back from that third summer in Canada with 25 juvenile delinquents, I had to go through some serious debriefing. So that kind of explains my take on life a little bit early on. Um, Now let's enter my high school years. Um, I went to school at Dubuque Senior, and 450 kids in my class, and we lived out in the country. So in the morning, I'd have to take the school bus to school, and if I had after school activities, I'd have to hoof it to the hospital and wait on my dad to finish his hospital rounds, and then get a ride home. Well, being that my dad was a psychiatrist, I got to wait in the mental ward. waiting room, and I got to see a bunch of stuff in that mental ward, and that had a. And my dad and I we'd ride home, and he'd ask me invariably. He said, "Well, what'd you see today?" And I'd look at him and go, "Dad, abnormal is normal." So that kind of explains my sense of humor. And then to cap this story off, I remember Dad and Mom went out of town, and I was the oldest in the family, so I had to babysit my three brothers. And one of his patients called me and called the house looking for Dad, and this patient was threatening to shoot himself. And here I am talking to a guy threatening to shoot himself, and I just said, "Look, dude, don't do it inside the house. You're going to make a mess. Go outside and do it so someone doesn't clean up your mess." Well, the guy hung up, and about a week later, my dad comes up to me and says, "Do you remember talking to so and so?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." And he says that my son's deeply disturbed. So anyway, now if there's any veterans out there, I know the seriousness of veterans and suicide, and I just want to tell you that in my book 8 Minutes, I've got a chapter in there that deals with veteran suicide, and that's the only chapter in my book 8 Minutes that kind of gets me teary eyed. I think I did a good job addressing that, and basically, if you read that book, you'll find out that the veteran's canine partner saved his life. So anyway,
Yeah.
just a little bit about that. So that kind of explains, why I write the way I do. I've just had a unique upbringing, and gives me a special outlook. And then, of course, you throw in 10 years being a deputy sheriff. So,
So why at such a late time in life, you said you're in mid-40s, that you want to get into law enforcement? What
uh,
what drove you to do that?
well, actually, Randy, back when I was thinking about a career, before I started college, I wanted to be an FBI agent. And someone led me astray saying, "Well, if you want to be an FBI agent, you got to be a lawyer," and that turned out to be false. And that
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on going to law school after undergraduate school, so I kind of blew that off. Um, but in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be involved in law enforcement some way. I started off as a reservist, reserve deputy, and ride-alongs, and then the department encouraged me to join the force, and work part time at night. So I would actually work for Auburn during the day from 8 to 5, normal shift, and then get home, get my uniform on, and pull another 8 hours at night. So I did it mostly at night when deputies needed some time off, and I worked a lot of hours on the weekends when deputies needed some personal time. So yeah,
That sounds tough.
yeah.
A lot of hours.
Hmm.
So what inspired you to be an author? What got you to say I want to write?
Okay.
And when did you
Um,
start writing?
I I was going to church, and one of my friends at church was a very prolific children's author, Eileen Henderson. She had written like 8 or 9 books at the time, and very, very, very successful. And she knew that I had worked on a catfish farm and had some had some ordeals on the catfish farm, and I was also reading a book, Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier, and this book just gripped me. It was a debut novel for Charles Frazier, and it became a bestseller. And it was a story about the Civil War, about a soldier in the Civil War, and he's got a romantic relationship, and takes place, I think, in Carolina or Virginia, and such a good story. And I said, "Damn, this is a debut novel. I wonder if I could write a book." So I started talking to Aileen, and she became a mentor for me. And she said, "Greg, just write what you know. Just write what you know." So I came up with Blue Green, and this is my first book, my debut novel. And I think I'll just go ahead and read the back cover of the synopsis, because I spent a week with the synopsis, and I can't describe it any better than this. Oh, here it is. Near the town of Tazewell, on the western edge of the Mississippi Delta, amidst vast fields of cotton and ponds of catfish, 24-year-old Warren Pope manages a paradise catfish farm. He befriends most of the locals and struggles with the Delta's lingering reluctance to cast aside the last remaining vestiges of social injustice. Pope's arch nemesis, Chief Deputy Leo Abrams, doesn't appreciate the Northern outsider, and the two tangle in a suspenseful, action-packed sequence of events that could only happen in the backwood haunts of Mississippi. And a lot of what's in this book actually happened to me. If you want to hear the story about me putting the truck underwater, I can tell that. I was working on this catfish farm in Alabama, and my shift was supposed to end about 6 o'clock after I checked the ponds for first time reading, and my nighttime guy called in sick, and he couldn't come to work, and so I had to pull another 8-10 hours after working in the Alabama heat and humidity all day long. So I was dog tired, and that particular year we had a really bad drought, and all the pond levels had receded away from the banks. So if you wanted to get an oxygen reading with your pole and your oxygen meter, you had to either lean way out the window or get out of the truck and go down to the water's edge to get an oxygen reading. Well, here I'm tired, and I'm in a hurry, got 30 pounds to check, and I got real close to the edge of this pond. It happened to be the deepest pond on the farm, 11 foot of water. And I got so close to the edge of the pond with my truck that must have been a muskrat burrow under my tire, and all of a sudden the bank gives way. And now I've got my hand sticking out the window holding my pole, and the truck is rolling over. And the truck actually rolled 3 times down the bank into the water, under the water, and it finally came to rest upside down in 11 foot of water. Now, Randy, it's dark down there. You've got 11 foot of water above you. It's already nighttime, and it's so dark you can't see your hand in front of your face. And now I'm running out of oxygen. I've got my mouth closed, the truck's full of water, and I got to get out the window. And fortunately, the window is down because I'm checking oxygen. So I tried to find the window, and I get out of the window, and I think my arm's busted, and the truck rolled over my arm at least once. So now I'm swimming out of the truck and come to the top. Now I got to swim to the bank with a busted arm. And then I got to walk a half mile to the owner's house. And then she takes me to the hospital because my arm's busted. And the funniest thing about this story is I'm laying there in bed. They got me hooked up to IVs. They got a little painkiller coming in. And a state trooper shows up. Alabama state trooper shows up. And he's got his clipboard, and he's standing there, and he says, "All right, Mr. Whitis, I hear you're involved in a truck accident." And I said, No, sir, it was really a farm accident. And he's asked me a bunch of questions, and he says, "Have you been drinking tonight?" And I said, "Man, I have not been drinking tonight, but over there in the corner of the hospital room is my soggy pair of pants, and there's a billfold in there. If you would run out and get me a 6-pack of beer right now, I'd really appreciate it. So that's the end of that story. But I put that story in Blue Green, and there's some other stuff in there. This book was written in the mid '80s, and we still had some racial tension in Mississippi and Alabama, and I wrote a lot about that racial tension. And the main character in the book, Warren Pope, he takes on a corrupt deputy sheriff, and so it's a good story. And then
Imagine that, a corrupt deputy sheriff in the South, right?
yeah,
Been a few written about them through the years, haven't they? So,
mhm, yeah.
so, so was that the first thing you wrote then? Was that book there, or had you
Right,
written
that was
some other stuff
my
before that?
first book, and then about 2 years later, I followed up with Nighthope. Nighthope. This is a funny book. I've had lots of readers but tell me they busted a rib laughing out loud about this book. This book is about a man who gets has a severe midlife crisis in Los Angeles and buys a catfish farm basically on a whim and moves his family out to West Alabama. Blue Green takes place in the Mississippi Delta. This one takes place in my neighborhood, West Alabama. And let me read the synopsis here. Stuart Barron, a humble Los Angeles trucking executive, endures a near-death experience. He moves his family from an affluent suburb to an Alabama catfish farm with hopes of quenching the midlife crisis. Together with Tabitha, his spellbinding wife, and Winchester, his precocious 5-year-old son, he rewrites Murphy's Law of catfish farming. Their adaptation to the Deep South and the ensuing culture shock is overshadowed by a daunting legacy involving a Mexican drug cartel. In the climactic finale, the Barron family, a quirky DEA agent, and a colorful cast of good old boys make for a powerful romp of old-fashioned justice in the backwoods of West Alabama. Um, Randy, I think you like this one because it's kind of a crime drama. The main protagonist, he's out running up in the hills of Los Angeles, and he finds a stash of money left over in a botched DEA raid, and he takes that money to West Alabama with him to help operate the catfish farm, and the cartel follows him out there. And DEA finds out about it, and they kind of set up shop on the farm, and sure enough, the cartel shows up, and so it's got a pretty good ending to it. Um, there's another fun. The funniest story in that book is, and my goal when I wrote this particular chapter was, have you ever read Mark Twain?
Long time
Mark,
ago.
yeah, Mark Twain has got the funniest thing I've ever read in one of his books. It's about a mining camp, um, and they have a naturalist in the mining camp, and this naturalist is collecting tarantulas, and he's got like 100 tarantulas in jars, and the jars are on the shelf in this mining camp in this cabin, and only Mark Twain can pull this off. It's so funny. And there's an earthquake in the mining camp, and all the tarantula jars fall off the shelf, and the tarantulas are loose in the cabin, and you got like 20 miners in there, and these are big, tough miners, and they are just freaking out because these tarantulas are running all over the place. And it's the funniest damn thing I ever read. So I said, when I write Night Hope, I am going to put a chapter in there. I'm going to try to make it as funny as Mark Twain. So here's what I came up with. We have this is a true story. I've got this farmer friend that pulled this off. We've got this female prison that just went up, federal female prison in Aliceville, Alabama. It houses about 400, 500 female prisoners. And this farmer friend of mine convinced his two employees that the prison needed employees on weekends to service the female prisoners that were there for good behavior. And these guys bought it hook, line, and sinker. And they told all their buddies, that, hey, the prison's hiring folks to service these females. And so folks are just lined up at the guard shack, and the guards are going nuts because no one told them 20, 30 people would be showing up to applying for a job. And it was all a farce, And I wrote about that, and the people told me that when they read that chapter, they just died laughing. Anyway.
That is an interesting way to get men to come in, right? That would definitely work. So you had those two books. Now you've got your latest book. When did your latest one come out? It's 8 Minutes, right?
Yeah, 8 Minutes came out in March. And I think it's doing pretty good. I just turned it into an audiobook last month. Yeah, it's a book about. It's my first science fiction book. I took my family up to Kentucky to watch a total solar eclipse, and I was just so impressed with that total. That was in the middle of the day. It was about noon, and the eclipse happened, and nature just kind of went on mute, like someone had mashed a mute button. The birds stopped chirping, and the insects, the cicadas, stopped doing what they do, and then it got cool. All right, it got cool. Then the stars came out. I mean, this is like new, man, and the stars came out, so it got pretty dark. And because it got so cool so fast, I started wondering about, man, that sun is so powerful. And then I started doing some solar research, and then I read this quote from an astrophysicist that he said. Let me read it to you. It's a true fact about the sun, and this kind of just blew me away, man. Um, the sun dims and brightens from time to time. A 1% change could be catastrophic. So I went on to read that, if the sun dimmed 1-2%, we'd either turn into Venus or turn into Mars in a matter of weeks. And I got to wondering, man, that would be a great book. And then I read this quote by an astronaut who was up there, and he was looking at Earth, and I'll read it to you. Oddly enough, the overriding sensation I got looking at Earth was, my God, that little thing is so fragile out there. So I wrote a book about what would happen if the sun just dimmed a little bit, and Earth turned into Mars in a matter of weeks, and apocalyptic setting. And it took me like 5 years of research to do it, to crank that one out. And people who read the book really appreciate the research that I did. I'll tell you a little bit about a funny thing about it. You can put the picture up. Some of the research that I did, I actually traveled quite a bit for it. And one of the spots that I went to was a Raven Rock mountain complex. Now this is where the president goes on Marine One when the crap hits the fan. All right, it's in southern Pennsylvania, and to give you an idea, there it is. To give you an idea, you can put 3 White Houses underground in this bunker. It's a presidential bunker. You can go on Google Earth Pro, and you can actually see the helipad from Marine One. All right. Now, we drove up there. I found it on Google Earth Pro, so I knew which road to go up. So we drove up the road, and I've got my dad with me. And my dad is one of these Thoreau guys that believes in civil disobedience. And he sees that sign he sees that sign right to the right that says no photography or no photography allowed or something like that. Well, Dad, right off the bat, he pulls his camera out and he just starts clicking away. That's Dad for you. And we're in Karen's car, and you can see there's a security camera right there in the middle on that tall black pole.
Yeah.
And Karen sees that, and she's just shaking her head because we're in her car, and she's got license plates, and she's just going, "Oh my God, they're reading the plates right now." And so she's thinking, well, she's going to end up in prison eventually for doing this photography thing. And so anyway, that's one of the research things that I did for 8 minutes. Uh, I also visited a decommissioned missile silo in Wyoming. Maybe I should read the synopsis of the book before I go any further.
Because it's this one, right?
That's another 5 billion years, agreed all the world's scientists except 2. After a massive solar flare wipes out nearly everything more complex than jumper cables, the sun dims and Earth's climate begins to rival that of Mars. The U.S. government, led by a distant presidential successor, takes shelter in a bunker, grappling with life-threatening global conditions as humanity is tossed back into the Stone Age. While the Raven Rock mountain complex is isolated, the rest of the world slowly devolves into a cosmic snowball. Recognized as an extinction-level event, a team of 4 embarks on a mission to rekindle the sun using the world's most powerful nuclear missile. Alex Tate, his quirky sidekick Mick Moore, and 2 war-hardened federal agents, Hans Jupp and Dirk Karsten, brave a frozen wasteland, encountering friendly preppers and dangerous thugs. Quincy and Tadarius, marooned at a remote Arkansas catfish processing plant, provide comic relief during their engaging struggle for survival. 8 minutes is a gritty, fast-paced romp through a realistic apocalypse. You'll never take the next sunrise for granted. And Lanissa Lane gave me a really nice plug here on the book. She's like you. She's a Silver Falcon Award winner. So I appreciate Lanissa helping me out there. So I did a lot of research for 8 minutes. Made it very plausible. Like I said, I went to a decommissioned missile silo in Wyoming, and I retraced. There you go. And I retraced the trek between the White House and NASA headquarters. And there's another thing about that. There was in my book. There's the character Mick Moore. He's living in the warehouse, in the basement of the NASA headquarters, and he's living inside an Airstream trailer. And you may ask, why did I pick an Airstream trailer? Well, when I was working in West Alabama, there was a Marion fish hatchery, a federal fish hatchery, about 30 miles from me, and they had an Airstream trailer there. And I talked to the director, and that Airstream trailer was actually used on an aircraft carrier when the first Apollo astronauts came back to Earth, and we were all worried about moon germs. And so each astronaut got an Airstream trailer for quarantine for a couple days until we cleared of the moon germs. And one of those Airstream trailers ended up at that federal fish hatchery. And when the Smithsonian folks heard about it, they came and got it and took it to Washington, D.C. But that's where I got that idea for the Airstream and the NASA basement. So, and stuff like that. And I have an Army friend that let me sit in a Humvee. Those of us who don't know this about our service members is they don't put keys in Humvees. That would be a whole nother foobar. Who's got the key to this thing? So you don't have a key in a Humvee. It's just a lever you switch and off you go. And then I had some great technical collaborators on this book. I guess my biggest collaborator was a commander in the Navy, special forces guy, and he helped me with all the technical writing for my encounters with the thugs in the story. And I really owe AJ offered a lot of thanks for his technical expertise there. I also had a meteorology professor at Iowa State, my alma mater, help me with the climate change. And then I had a University of Alabama physics professor help me with the physics behind the story. And I had two medics help me with medical issues. So there's a lot of research went into 8 minutes, and it's a good book. And I want to take this time to shout out to Atmosphere Press. Atmosphere Press is a hybrid publisher. They're a very selective hybrid publisher. They only accept about 2% of the manuscripts that are submitted to them. But man, when you get on board with them, they hook you up with an excellent editor. I had a great editor, Jonathan Smith. He made the book what it is. Very unusual service for a hybrid publisher to offer an in-depth editing service, and then the marketing has just been superb. So shout out to Atmosphere Press.
Are your other books hybrid also?
No, Randy. My first two, Nighthope and Blue Green, were Vanity published, and I didn't go with them again because they don't have the editing service that
Sure.
this hybrid publisher has, and I, you know, we all need a good strong editor to make our works even better. And that's just something about vanity publishing you have to go through, unlike a hybrid publisher or traditional publisher. And I didn't want to go to a traditional publisher route because I've heard so many stories about it just takes forever to get anything done, to get your book out, and I don't like the games that they play.
It does take a long time.
Yeah,
So, are you working on something new
I am. I'm working on two
too?
books
Okay.
simultaneously. I'm working on my first nonfiction and then a fiction. My nonfiction, this is going to blow some people away. I'm a Lewis and Clark amateur historian, and I've traced Lewis and Clark from the Mississippi River in St. Louis all the way to Idaho. And my next leg, if my wife approves, is to backpack to the Bitterroots in Idaho and follow the campsites that Lewis and Clark used. And the reason why we can find these campsites is back in the day, back in the 1803, 1804, these men used a lot of mercury for medicine. And so all you've got to do is find the mercury out in the woods, and you know where these guys camped. So I'm gonna retrace their steps to the Bitterroot Mountains. But anyway, while I did that, retracing their steps from Mississippi to Idaho, I got halfway out to South Dakota, and I'm going, well, where's Sacagawea? Sacagawea was the Indian guide that helped them. If it hadn't been for her, they wouldn't have made it out the Pacific and back. Um, and I'm looking for Sacagawea's gravesite. There you go. And she doesn't have a gravesite. So this became a quest.
Mhm.
And my next book is going to be called "The Bones of Sacagawea: A Quest for Her." And I've done a lot of research on her, and I think, and this first time I'm going to say this on social media, I think I may have found her remains.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to be writing a book about that. And the Lewis and Clark people in Montana are going to freak out when they hear this. And I'm not going to spill any more beans about it, but hopefully this book will be out um, in a week or so. Just picture this, Randy. Picture that last scene in the Indiana Jones movie where he's after the Ark of the Covenant, and they got this huge federal warehouse,
Right.
and there's a guy wheeling a cart with his plywood box, and he's going to put it in storage. That's a scene I want you to think about when you hear me talk about the quest for her. That's kind of going to be a similar engine. Yeah.
That'll be interesting to hear about.
Yeah. And then my fiction book, the reason why I'm going to write a fiction book and a nonfiction book at the same time is I've got to wait for collaborators to pull through on the nonfiction aspect. So while I'm waiting on folks to help me with the collaboration, I'm going to write the fiction book, which is called Harley. And this is basically about a guy that his wife dies of a terminal disease, brain disease, and she she was one of these recluses in a house and never left the house, and so he kind of had a very isolated marriage with her. He didn't go anywhere, never had vacations outside the house. So she dies and leaves him a bunch of money, and he buys a Harley, and he decides he's going to go out and find his estranged son. His son left the household and went out to Northern California. And on the main character's way out to California from Alabama, he's kind of like the equalizer. He's a former deputy sheriff and chief deputy, and he runs into these Waffle House waitresses that are being abused, and he's kind of like the equalizer, and little justice there on the way out, and doesn't. I'm not going to be a spoiler here, but he ends up out in California, and in the final ending, he basically got to leave the country in a hurry, and he ends up tending bar in Costa Rica. So that's the story behind that.
So, is there a book that you want to write that you haven't written yet? Something a little out of the ordinary. I mean, those are kind of probably those were been burning a hole in your head for a while. But is there something else that's kind of you've been thinking about? And
Well, I think I've been through enough crap where I could probably write a pretty good memoir.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. The memoir is probably going to be in the works when I get these next two knocked out.
okay. You got a title in mind?
Not yet, Randy. Not
Yeah,
yet. Not
still
yet. That's
working.
way down the road.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think I need to tell you all the story about my participation in the armed robbery. I've had a lot of I told a lot of my folks out here in West
Mhm.
Alabama. I'm going to tell this story. You got
Sure.
time for that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, back maybe about 20 years ago, the reason why I'm going to tell this story now is statute of limitations has kind of run out, and I don't have to worry about ending up in the slammer. Um, I wrote down some notes because I'm involved in the fish business, and I don't want to get folks kind of confused about my fish business in this story. So I got to kind of explain some things. But I was sitting at my desk in the experimental field station when Frank dropped by. Frank's a friend of mine, and it was late October. Things had slowed down on the catfish farm, and I was catching up on my journal reading. And Frank was a live hauler that I put in business. And Frank didn't know squat about catfish or live hauling fish, so I helped him get his truck rigged up and told him all the particulars about hauling fish and keeping them healthy. And he had an interesting twist to his rig. He was a heavy smoker, and so he rigged up an oxygen tube to come in the cab of his truck, and he had an oxygen mask, and so he would drive this 30,000-pound truck down the road breathing oxygen from his oxygen tank that he used to keep the fish alive, and I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, he he wanted me to ride shotgun with him down to Mobile. Mobile is about a 3 hour ride from me in Greensboro here, and he had some business he had to take care of. Their business.
Yes.
All right. Um, so I said, sure. Let me check my calendar, and I looked at my calendar for the afternoon. Said, yeah, I can do that. So I hop in the truck with him, riding shotgun. And every time I hear the phrase riding shotgun, I remember this episode of my life. Um, so about halfway to Mobile, Frank tells me about this business matter. And I also know the other guy in the business matter. He was a guy that I helped get into the pay lick business. I can't remember his name, but I remember the street that lived on. And this pay lick operation was basically in the middle of the city of Mobile. All right. Um, Dawes Road. And all you folks down in Mobile listening to this, Dawes Road, Dawes. Um, so this guy, according to Frank, was a boss in the Mobile Mafia. Uh, and let me give you some history on Frank here. Frank was a Birmingham cop, ex Birmingham cop in the late 60s and early 70s. And he had shot two people in self defense. They were good shoots. And but the police chief said, Frank, I think maybe you better get in another line of business, after shooting two people on duty. So Frank moved to Tuscaloosa and he became the city's biggest bookie. And I met him through another fish farmer. And Frank wanted to get in the live hauling business, so I helped him with that. So anyway, and then this guy in Mobile ended up owing him a bunch of money, and Frank and he owed him money for several months. It was like $4,000, $4,500, and Frank waited and waited and waited for this guy to pay up, and he never did pay up for a load of fish that he had delivered down there, and it was time to get the money. So here I am. I'm going with him. Didn't know this. I didn't know this at the time. I just was riding shotgun down to Mobile. All right. So this guy down in Mobile had done time in prison. Uh, he was a bookie also down there. And when I first met him, getting him set up on the farm, I noticed he had a 25 caliber semi-auto in his back pocket, halfway sticking out of the back pocket. So from the get go, I knew I had to keep my head on a swivel with this guy. And so we get down there, and I'm going back my notes here. And this is this clear, cool day back in October, and we pull in the parking lot, and Frank spins his Toyota Compact Toyota pickup around, and he backs up to the loading ramp, smacks the concrete wall. I remember that vividly because usually Frank doesn't make mistakes like this, but he was a little bit edgy. Frank was not normally edgy, and I knew something was going on. And then he says to me, Greg, I need you to get behind the wheel. And I said, all right. So I get behind the wheel, and he disappears in the back door. And I'm going, oh God, what have I got myself into? And I'm watching the rearview mirror, and Frank comes flying out the back door. And this Frank is like 70 years old, 50 pounds overweight, and he jumps in the back of the pickup and right in the bed off the loading dock. And he says, go, 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 go. And so I take off, squealing gravel, and we hit the road, go down Dawes Road about 3 blocks. And he wraps on the roof, and I stop, and he gets in. He starts counting a tight roll of money, all $100 bills. He counts about 40 of them, $4,000 worth. And the first words out of his mouth are, that son of a bitch owes me $500. And then he grins, let's go back. And I stare the whole ride in on him. I says, dude, you owe me a pair of shorts. And, and we let the adrenaline kind of flush away for about a half an hour. Then we just started laughing all the way home. So that's my story about participating in an armed robbery. And
May
both
end up
both
in your memoir, huh?
yeah, both Frank and that guy in Mobile have passed on. I'm the only I'm the only witness to the affair there, and I'm not too worried.
All right. Well, we're getting close to an hour, so we'll start to wrap up here. But I wanted to ask the question I always ask everybody:
Yeah,
when you're writing a book, what do you do to bring life to those characters? Get them to jump off the page, make them realistic. Do you have any
man.
secrets?
Yeah, when I write about my main character, I want the reader to have a mind meld with them. I want that reader to feel like he or she can belly up to that character at a bar and just get to know them better. I want to develop that relationship. And also I encourage new writers, give your main character flaws. We all have flaws, to make them more realistic, and just just get inside the head of that main character and put it down on paper somehow.
So obviously, some of your characters have been people you've known through the years. You said a little
Yeah,
bit of it's from your experiences and stuff.
sure,
Uh,
sure.
has that been a common theme in your books?
Yeah, I would
Um,
say so.
like you
In
said,
my
write what you know, as your wife told you.
right, right. In my first one, Blue Green Warren Pope. That's kind of like me, I moved to the South from the Midwest, and the research for that book was easy. I mean, I lived it, and then in Nighthope, um, I went through culture shock, moving to Alabama from Iowa, and it's funny. I tried to start a new genre, Randy, called male midlife crisis, but it didn't really take off. I think it'd be a great genre, but so far I think I'm the only one that's ever written a book about male midlife crisis and night hope. But yeah, write what you know and do a mind meld with your character and make them realistic, give them flaws, work through the flaws.
And that would be your advice for aspiring authors as
Right.
well, since you kind of
Yeah.
started a little bit later in life being
Hmm.
an author and having some success. You've obviously taken a while to write your last book.
Yeah.
A
I
lot of
enjoy
research.
writing. I love the creativity. It's yeah.
All right. So, where can people find you? I got your website here. You've got a lot of stuff on your website.
Yeah, that if people want signed copies of my books, they can get a signed copy, and if you get all three books, I'll pay the shipping, and I'll send you a free coffee cup, eight
Oh,
minute coffee
yeah.
cup with
Nice.
with the three books, and then if you want to get unsigned copies, you of course can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, all independent bookstores that can order. I doubt they're going to have it in stock, but they can order it for you. Um, yeah.
And do you do like a newsletter?
I don't do a
People-
newsletter.
Yeah.
No, I really should. I haven't picked that up yet.
Yeah, I looked at your website. You have a lot of pictures on your website.
Hmm.
Um, some of you, dogs. It seems like there's some dogs, like in 8 minutes. There's a dog in 8 minutes, right?
Right, right. On the front cover, there's a golden retriever, and he's a lucky dog. He gets to come along and go to the bunker with the family. That's been kind of kidnapped by the federal government because the main character is an astrophysicist, and is the only one they can find to figure out the solution to the sun. So the family dog gets to come along. Um, One of my beta readers was worried that I was going to eat the dog in the story, and the dog does fine.
Well, we hope that doesn't happen, right? Yes, doesn't get quite that bad. And then you have social media, you have a website page, or
Yeah,
a Facebook page, I believe, and
Gregory Whitis books. It will get you to all my books.
great. Anything else you wanted to cover?
No, pretty much got it all.
Covered most of it.
Yeah.
So the one last question I was going to ask you: you must like the humidity. You live in the South. You went to Iowa. You must be one of those guys because I escaped Iowa to get away from the humidity here in
Yeah.
Colorado, though I wish it was a little wetter here sometimes. But
I have a personal rule on my acreage. I don't operate a chainsaw if humidity is above 70% because the humidity just starts wearing you out and you start getting stupid operating a chainsaw, and you can't afford to be stupid operating a chainsaw. So I do most of my chainsaw work in the fall when the humidity drops some. But yeah, this humidity out here, man, I go running in the morning. That's how I get my epiphanies from my writing. Is I do a 5 mile run walk, and I have to do it in the morning time at daybreak because the humidity out here at noon is just unbearable, man. You can cut it with a machete. It's so thick.
yes, it's pretty crazy. Like I said, I don't miss the humidity in the
No.
Midwest in the summertime. It's like I said, sometimes I wish it was a little wetter out here. We're actually getting some rain tonight, which is a good thing because we've had so many fires here lately and stuff. So,
Yeah.
all
Okay.
right, great. Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate you being on the show. All the best to you on your book. I'll be interested to hear about your Sacagawea, Sawaya. I always hear it pronounced both ways, but
Okay.
be interested to hear about where the bones are.
Well,
That'll be great.
I'm looking forward to listening to your first book. What was that? Justice for the Forgotten. I'll be listening to that on audiobook on my airplane ride this weekend.
It'll actually be the Divine Devils. I don't have Justice yet, just in there. The Divine Devils is my
Okay.
earlier
Okay.
series, but yes,
All right.
that's the one I won the Silver Falchion for. But that's okay.
Okay. I
Justice,
got
I
one
want
more
to get
book
Justice
on
as a
audiobook.
audio book here eventually too. So,
Okay. All
well,
right.
thank
Well,
you, sir.
Manny, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, all the best to you, and hopefully we'll run into each other at some other events down the road.
Okay.
Take care. All right, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you being on tonight, listening to Greg's stories. He had some great stuff there. Lots of material for books and stuff. I may have to pick his brain down the road again. My next guest will be next Monday at 6 p.m. again, Mountain Time. I'm going to have author Dale Phillips on. And he's another author I've met through all these events I've done through the years. Killer Nashville, he's done quite a few years. And he'll have some interesting information, I'm sure, about being an author. So thanks, everyone. Take care. We'll see you next week.